Hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining me. I of course am Rotype, and I'm back here with MouseGunner in our Factorio guided series. And in between episodes, I just built a really simple electric pole manufacturer here. And as you can see, it's just really simple, two materials on the same belt into a machine and out into a box. And the reason I did that is because I wanted these medium electric poles, which if you are watching my video and you can see here on the screen, the kind of bluish area in which a pole will power an entity is much bigger. Kind of overlay it over the small pole here is much bigger than the small poles, and they're just better. They you can cover farther distance. I'll kind of show that here. You can stretch them out a lot farther than you could a small pole. So in general, they're just 100% better. You'll notice I'm not even making the small poles in this section at all. Partially because the small poles require wood, and to get wood on the bus is just annoying. And yeah, so this is a good idea. I don't know if you just did this, dump all your small poles. I like doing this. Get rid of the small poles. And the big poles, I'll demonstrate that briefly here. They, as you can see, they're quite large, and they have a pretty small catchment area for powering things. So you can imagine, well, what good is that? Well, they're very good, as you can see on my screen again here. You can put another pole this far away and they'll be connected. So you can imagine these are like the high voltage, long distance transmission lines. And so we'll be running these between different areas of the factory that need power that you don't necessarily need much power in between. And you'll also see these kind of along rail lines. Once we get to the railroad, you'll see I'll build these next to my rail lines to kind of carry the power along the railroad where you don't necessarily need power in between. So that was just a simple build we did between episodes, because this episode we're going to get our belts being made automatically, so we don't have to keep making them by hand. He says as he makes a bunch by hand because he's running low. Now, the first step towards this is really just building a bunch of gears, because belts are hungry for gears, all the different kinds of belts, all different speeds. So this might be maybe a little overkill, but I'm okay with it because, as I said, we're just going to need a ton of gears. So we'll go ahead and designate these as a gear factory. And I'll go ahead and get started with the belt section. Maybe just a little bit, give us some space over here. The nice thing is, this is a pretty simple layout. It sometimes is hard to remember, which is why I have a picture of it that I'm referencing. But this will make all the belts in the game. It will also make all of the underground belts in the game. And it will also make all of the splitters in the game. So this is just a nice little 3x3 section. It doesn't take up too much space. And you can get all of these things kind of taken care of. So it's pretty useful. Now, we don't have all of these things unlocked yet, but I'll go ahead and set up what we do have. And that way we can be prepared for the next section when we need the faster belts. And this was fast splitter. There we go. And so that's what we have unlocked so far. Now, what this is going to look like is iron plate here, because that is needed for these machines. And then pretty much down the middle, we're just going to need gears. And this is why you'll see that, oh, I'm out of transport belt. This is why you'll see that this whole array is just super gear hungry, because all of these machines need gears. And some of these machines need a ton of gears. Like, so this fast underground belt needs 20 iron gear wheels in every half second. And we're not going to be running this that quickly. We just don't have really the need to run it that quickly, or the ability to at this time. But as I said before, it's useful to have just a ton of gears being produced so we can actually run as much of this as we can. And so the gears, like I said, are just kind of going to be running down the middle. And actually, we're also going to run them kind of in between. So this is kind of a cool thing you don't always see. And I actually did this backwards. You can run the gears directly underneath the assembly machines to give access to just more gears, and you can put these splitters in, and you can imagine like that's not actually splitting anywhere, but what you can do then is just gives you an extra place to suck in the gears. So that's why we have here this splitter, and we'll repeat that here as well. Kind of gears in. Oops, again, I did this backwards. Under and under. And even again, this belt on the end is not going anywhere, but I'm building it so we have an extra place where we can put an inserter to get the gears in, because like I said before, these machines just need so many gears. So now I have 4, and we'll do the 5th one here.
So where do the gears go on this line I'm standing on right now?
No, that is the iron plate. The gears go on all 5 of these kind of inputs down here. All of them. This array needs a ton of gears.
Are we using splitters for that? Is that how we're going to do that?
Yep. And there are, we haven't even talked about this, but there are tons of different kind of accepted or not accepted ways of doing splitting. You can imagine, you know, I have one input and I want to split into X number of outputs, but I can only split 2 at a time. And the 2 is always an even split. So there are all these different ways of doing it, and people have done kind of math on how to do it. And there's on different like subreddits and on forums, there's all these different ways of ideally splitting, you know, it's generally called M to N, M inputs into N outputs. So here we have 1 input into 5 outputs. Now, it doesn't really matter. You can imagine one way of doing it is to just, you know, do this and then do it again and then do it again. And each one you siphon off and run this one. This is not an M to N. As you can see, this is a 1 to 2. So half of this total input is going in the first one and then half of it again. So you're really only getting a quarter down this one and you're left with a quarter this way. So this one only gets an 1/8. So if you want to be even about how you're distributing your outputs, let's say, so for all of these 5, let's just say I wanted all 5 to get 1/5 of the input. This is not how you do it. And that's where all of these fancy kind of layouts come. This gets into another part of this game. We've talked a little bit about this before, where you can be as fancy and as efficient as you want. When it comes down to it, if you've backed up this column that's getting half of the input, then this one is going to get more than half of the input because it's going to get the overflow from the first column. So there are pros and cons to spending a lot of time trying to do it the most efficiently. One of the cons being it can take a long time when sometimes you just want to get the gears there, you know. We'll do it this way, and then when it backs up, it'll go into this one, and when it backs up, it'll go into the next one. Still gets the job done. Not as efficient, but it gets the job done. Oops, and I'll finish that up here. The one thing I will do over here is utilize the other half of the belt. So I'm going to do that by actually moving this up 1. Oops. Add an extra belt there. So now you'll notice that the other half of the belt, the other side, is now being used. And I did that, again, just to increase the throughput, right? So you can imagine if you're only using half of the belt, you can only get the total belt carrying capacity divided by 2 to the end, to the machines. By using both sides, because this is not going to be a half and half belt like we've been using over here. This is just a pure gear belt. I went ahead and added this little kind of squiggle to put the top 3 machines on one side and the bottom 2 on the other. We only have this many machines, but you can imagine we could put a third one here and then it would be perfectly even. Doesn't really matter, you know, as long as you have enough moving. Sometimes this matters, and you'll see once we turn all this on, this will consume all the gears. So if you're really concerned about throughput and maximizing it, you're going to want both sides evenly loaded, fully loaded, et cetera, et cetera. I will go through and add all of these inserters. Now
the one thing that I must admit, I got a little confused on. You were saying that what we're doing right now is not the most efficient way of doing it?
Right. So we can spend a little more time on this because it does get a little confusing. So let's see. I'm trying to think of a convenient way to do this on the fly, but I'm just going to draw a, whoops, got stuck on my own belt, pushed over. So this is conveniently I'm out of belt. If we have this belt and it's running, some amount of input, let's say you want to split into 3 outputs. 1, 2, 3. And let's pretend that these never back up, right? They're being constantly consumed at the rate at which they get their input. You could do that. Now, what that would do, because every splitter splits half one way, half another way. So if you did this, the first thing that happens, let's just say this brings in, I'm going to make up a number, 10. So let's bring in 10 units per second. At this first splitter, 5 units per second are now up here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to same thing. I'm just going to give one extra space, right? So this is the same thing we just had, just with a space here.
Mm-hmm.
This little space in here also has 5 units per second, just this little square.
And then
this one has 5. Right. So now
right?
These have 2.5 each, and this one has 5, which if that's what you're designing for, that's fine. But if you want to split 3 such that they're all equal, that's not the result you get. Now, if I remember off the top of my head, I'm not even going to try because I'm probably going to get it wrong, but there are different ways of building these such that, and they usually involve some kind of loop back, you can, well, like I said, I'm not even going to try, but you can loop certain pieces back into it. I'll give a quick example that's probably incorrect, but it will serve the purpose. So here it's a 2 to 4. And in this case, because it's a multiple, you actually get the output, right? You get half out of this first one, and then that is each half is then divided into half. But if you only pull out the 3, again, same thing we just wanted. I want all 3 of these to have the same. I believe the way this works. Whoops. These are kind of, accepted designs you can find on Reddit or on forums. If you loop this back, you're then dividing this extra output by all 4 again. I'm not sure. I'd have to do the math. And like I said, this is possibly not the right way to do it. But there are all of these different designs for doing this. This is a 1 to 3. You can imagine, like, for example, right here, we want a 1 to 5. You can do any number of different ways. You can have multiple inputs. So let's say we had another gear factory here, line of gear factories, and we had 2. Then we need a 2 to 5. There's all these different ways you can split. And like I said before, if you're really interested in it, you can search. The best thing I've ever found is on Reddit. If you search for, well, what is it called? I believe it's ideal M to N balancers is what one of the posts is called. At the very least, if you search that, you'll get about, you'll be able to read up about it and see some examples of how people have come up with different ways of doing it. Or in fact, part of this game is having the fun of trying to figure it out yourself, because it's a pretty simple thing. A splitter splits it in half. You just got to go through and you can either do the math or you can build little experiments. People have built little test rigs they put a specific number of material in a box at the start. And if it's divided evenly, each branch will have a specific number, divided by whatever your branches are at the end. So it's a whole different aspect of this game that has nothing to do with launching a rocket or fighting biters. It's kind of going through and doing the math or doing the experiments to figure out the ideal way of doing it. And there's a significant amount of people in the community that play this game who play it that way. And it can be fun. It can also get kind of tedious and annoying, but everybody has their own method. So that was my long-winded explanation.
No, I followed it pretty good. I think that explained it in a way. I mean, it's a complex subject.
Yes, and if it comes up again, repeatedly or again, we can always kind of draw out some of those examples. I can look up some of the accepted ways, and we can just kind of trace through a few examples and say, draw out a 1 to 5 and say, okay, go through it step by step and say, this is why this is exactly, what people have done and why it works. So obviously, if people are watching this and want to go through that, leave a comment or something, and we'll go ahead and talk about it. But for now, I think there's hopefully a sufficient explanation to just get you interested. And if you're really interested in it, feel free to try and figure it out yourself. Come up with your own designs, and go from there and see what you come up with.
All right, so we have all of the ingredients for our belt, but we are not pulling those resources yet, if I'm reading this correctly.
Yes. So again, you can open the box,
inserters.
right, and you'll see that it has plenty of gears, but no iron plate. So this actually needs a fast one.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And yep. So an easy way to see if your inserters are too slow so let's go ahead and put a regular inserter back here. If you open up the machine, and actually so if you open up the machine and you hover over the transport belt on the right at the end of the box, you'll see that the 0 out of 1 iron plate is red. We've talked a little bit about this before, but it can sometimes be hard to tell. You can also hear the machine. If you're used to hearing it, it has a different sound when it's running constantly. But an easy way to check is to just hover over and see that it's red, and you'll see that the iron plate is red, and now it is white, which is constantly running. To check some of these other machines, yes, forgot the green circuits are required for splitters only, so they need to come down this column.
All right, I'll get that to you here in a second.
Great. And then I think I'm missing a few other inserters, but I'll go ahead and just kind of fill these in. And then it's just a matter of making sure all of these have the right input. So for example, this fast underground needs the regular underground. So I'll build a transfer station there. This needs the regular belt. And you can see already, this is a great example. Mouse, you must have done this because I wasn't paying attention, but the electric poles are in such like a nice, even square, lined up with everything. It's fantastic. This is way better than the small poles. You can tell, what kind of Factorio player I am. I'm very, take my time, take my space. Maybe it's efficient, maybe it's not, but really, does it look good? That's the most important thing to me.
All right, we're almost ready to go here. There we go.
Good. I'm just finishing up on the inserters. I think everything almost ready to go. A few more boxes I need to supply as well. Let's see, some output boxes here and here.
No, you need boxes. I have some in my inventory, so you don't have to make them.
Yeah, we can just. I'm gonna go ahead and finish this end. Oh, if I remember the right hotkey to push. There we go. Jeez. Wooden box. What is that?
Well, I had it in my inventory, so I figured.
Wooden boxes, like the wooden poles, deserve to be burned. And we'll get to that soon, because one of my favorite things to do with wooden boxes is burn them in the car. And we are almost there. Maybe next episode we'll probably take a look at engines, which means shortly after engines will be the car. And I don't know why it makes me so happy, but it makes me happy to burn the poles in the car. A couple other things here to finish up. You can see how this array can get really I mean, it's complicated, it works, and it's great, but it's easy to forget a couple things, which is why I had to end up making myself a picture of it.
All right, well, I think it's getting close to that time.
Yep, that looks like it. So, as always, thank you all very much for watching. I've been Rotype, he's been MouseGunner, and we'll see you next time.